With Ukrainian resistance standing its ground and providing formidable against invading Russian forces, it's possible the ground war waged by Russian President Vladimir Putin that is entering its second month could continue for some time, Northeastern experts say. And if the US and its NATO allies are going to avoid becoming militarily involved in a conflict that could spill over into other Western nations, potentially igniting a third world war, developments in the coming days will prove critical, says Mai'a Cross, the Edward W. Brooke Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at Northeastern. What that conflict could look like varies. It's possible, Cross says, that US and NATO involvement would remain conventional, meaning it would involve the deployment of air and ground forces, tanks, artillery, military helicopters, and fighter jets to beat back Russia's forces. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sticking Point. Today, we'll discuss the possibility of Russia declaring World War III, and if it happens, what events are likely to follow. But before, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more similar content. Let's begin. In his starkest assessment yet, US President Joe Biden has declared that the world is the closest it has come to nuclear catastrophe in 60 years. And so it comes as no surprise that many of us are worried. We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis, he said. Putin not joking when he talks about potential use of tactical nuclear weapons or biological or chemical weapons because his military is, you might say, significantly underperforming. And it's true in the sense that Putin and his officials have threatened nuclear weapons against the US and allies in pursuit of its invasion of Ukraine. A dark and depressing time as the prospect of nuclear war is, it is natural to be curious about its potential. A global study led by Rutgers climate scientists estimates post-conflict crop production. Lead author Lily Zia, an assistant research professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers, and co-author Alan Robach, a distinguished professor of climate science in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University, have built upon past research to determine what would happen if there was a nuclear war. Gia, Robach, and colleagues have calculated how much sun-blocking soot could be ignited as a result of nuclear weapons. The researchers determined soot dispersal for a variety of war scenarios, from smaller India-Pakistan wars to a large US-Russia war. They based the destruction of the size of each country's nuclear arsenal. Even under the smallest nuclear scenario, say a localized war between India and Pakistan, the destruction would be immense. The global average caloric production would decrease by 7% within 5 years of the conflict. The team also tested what would happen in the event of US-Russia nuclear conflict. In this instance, global average caloric production would decrease by about 90% 3 to 4 years after the fighting. Crop declines would be the most severe in the mid-high latitude nations. This includes major exporting countries such as Russia and the US. Declining crops could lead to export restrictions and cause severe disruptions in places dependent on imports such as Africa and the Middle East. The research team predicted that these changes would induce a catastrophic disruption of global food markets. In fact, a 7% global decline in crop yield might not sound like much, but its impact would be astronomical. It would exceed the largest anomaly ever recorded since the beginning of Food and Agricultural Organization observational records in 1961. And under the largest war scenario, a war between the US and Russia, more than 75% of the planet would be starving within 2 years. The team considered whether using crops fed to livestock as human food or reducing food waste could offset caloric losses in the immediate aftermath of a nuclear war, but concluded that the savings were minimal under the large injection scenarios. Future work will bring even more granularity to the crop models, Zia said. Putin on September 21st warned the West he was not bluffing when he said he would be ready to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia against what he said was nuclear blackmail from major Western powers. U.S. President Joe Biden has said the world faces the biggest risk of nuclear Armageddon since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. NATO is due to hold an annual nuclear preparedness exercise dubbed Steadfast Noon next week. Russia and the United States are by far the biggest nuclear powers. They control about 90% of the world's nuclear warheads. Benediktov and Zelensky's call for preventative strikes against Russia was dangerous, cautioning that nuclear war would have catastrophic consequences for the world. We must remember, a nuclear conflict will absolutely affect the whole world, not only Russia and the collective West, but every country on this planet, Benediktov said. The consequences would be disastrous for all mankind. The invasion of Russia and Ukraine has raised questions about the possible World War III. The leader Kim Jong-un aims to develop the nuclear arms program at high speeds. The missile test has raised the stakes. The intermediate-range rocket, which flew 4,600 kilometers, 2,860 miles, hit Japan and landed in the ocean. Security dynamics in Northeast Asia have become increasingly volatile, with China's growing military threats and in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, revealed a newspaper. Growing possibility of the new war is threatening the safety of the world. The general public is also under the fear of getting affected by the war. The two countries have already been under stress due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. There is a lot of brinksmanships between the international leaders. This has stoked fears that there will be a third world war on the horizon. All the international leaders have a lot of concerns about the possibility of World War III. The leaders of different nations are fearing that the world might get shaken by the threat of the new world war. The stability came from the preservation of a global balance between power and states. All the nations have been staying away from each other's fears. None of them have been holding up, and the aggressions by countries like Russia, Iran, and China have fueled a range of geopolitical tensions. Putin has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia got away easily with the crimes, and all the neighboring nations like Georgia and Syria have played a part as well. There are chances of invasion of Ukraine. This is seen as the next world war, and it might be a key turning in the broader conflict. The countries that possess the biggest nuclear arsenal are not only a cause of concern. There has been a lot of nuclear stability and a lot of uncertainty surrounds when it comes to the efforts to stop Iran from joining the nuclear club. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi shared that the investigation carried out by the International Atomic Energy Agency has raised concerns about the safeguards issues. The undeclared Iranian nuclear sites have to deal with all the problems. The U.S. has refused to end the probe and will be postponing the fundamental question of Iran joining the nuclear agreement, which could lead to the next world war. Taiwanese territory will be increasing the military budget. Taiwan will be increasing its military budget and has given a response to the threat of aggression from China. The leaders of the Chinese Communist Party have been working for decades to increase the military budget. The Chinese leader will be preparing the country's 20th Party Congress, and the whole process will be taking place in November. This is a sensitive time for Taiwan and other countries. Is a new Russian empire on the way? The outbreak of war in Ukraine has raised concerns over Moscow and Beijing. They will be driving concerns over the struggles for democracy. Although there is a lot of difference between Ukraine and Taiwan battling the democracies, the country's nuclear-armed military powers have made it clear that the neighbors will be the sovereign states. Russia's president has been making excuses for the invasion of Ukraine. He aims to conquer the world and create a new Russian empire. At an event held in Moscow, Putin elaborated that the Imperial version will be the return of the land of Ukraine. There will be a lot of responsibility on Russia, an agenda that has been facing an unprecedented challenge. It will pose a grave threat to the TWW2. The list of countries that could come under threat will have to suffer. Putin will be creating an imperial mission. This may look far-fetched, but Ukraine believes that the Russian invasion was remote. Keeping in view the current Russia-Ukraine war situation and several warnings from Russia of using nuclear weapons, U.S. President Joe Biden, too, had warned openly that Vladimir Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine might bring the world closer to Armageddon at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Biden said that the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world has a direct threat to the use of nuclear weapons, if in fact things continue down the path they've been going. What do you think will happen if events unfold and it leaves us to a world war? Let us know in the comments section below.